Yugoslavia with Stalin at the time, wrote, I quote, "The Berlin Congress and the Versailles Peace Treaty unjustly damaged the interests of Albania and the Albanian national minority in Kosovo. They did not agree with this resolution of that question, and they do not wish to remain within the borders of Yugoslavia, independent of its political order. Their only solution would be to politically join Albania." The mentioned Russian historian Yelena Guskova, in her quite voluminous work, says the separatist activity of the radically minded section of Albanians in Kosovo and Metohija started immediately after World War II and did not stop for a second. Already in 1956, the security service discovered in the province several groups which a few years earlier were infiltrated to Kosmet from Albania in order to create illegal nationalist organizations. At the end of the 50s and in the early 60s, the organization of the revolutionary movement for the unification of Albanians was active in Kosmet, it was headed by Adem Demaci. End of quote. Citing that in the course of the 60s, Albanian terror became much more active, meaning that the Albanian separatists in that period organized, I quote, provocations, sabotages, and that they attacked religious facilities. The same author explains that the situation did not calm down even in the 70s, despite the fact that in 1974, Kosmet practically was ripped away from the legal system of Serbia, and citing an interview that the #1 person of the police, the Minister of Internal Affairs, a Croat, by the way, Frano Herljevic, gave, says that he cited the following fact, and I quote, "From 1974 until 1981, the security organs discovered over 1,000 people who were involved in undermining the system from the positions of Albanian nationalism. Many of them, according to him, are linked to one of the most active organizations of the so-called Red Front. It's a pro-Albanian organization active in the territory of the Western countries, aimed at which is directed and channeled by the Albanian Party of Labor." Following the unrests of the Albanian separatists from March 1981, the Albanian separatist movement openly advocates the idea of a Kosovo Republic, or the secession of Kosovo from Serbia and then from Yugoslavia, and finally this territory joining the territory of Albania. If you look at the demographic structure of Kosovo and Metohija at the end of the 19th century and then at the end of the 20th century, you can see that it had drastically changed to the detriment of the Serbs. The biggest changes took place specifically during the crimes which occurred during World War II from 1941 to 1945. After the adoption of the Constitution in 1974, each political, judicial, or executive power in Kosovo was in the hands of the Albanian minority there. In particularly from 1966, and then, of course, following the adoption of the Constitution in 1974, the Albanians in this part of Serbia used this power to harass the Serbian majority and to flame interethnic intolerance, which resulted in daily expulsions of Serbs, instead of the essential spirit of tolerance and understanding and a civilized cultivation of relations with other people. The paradox of this whole situation lies in the fact that the Albanians in Kosovo and Metohija, whose leadership claimed that for centuries they were discriminated against actually and oppressed actually achieved such a level of economic prosperity that already in the 80s you could see a vast difference between the situation in Kosovo and the situation in Albania, where they had their own national states, of course, in favor of their position in Kosovo and Metohija. The Albanian minority in Serbia, namely in Kosovo and Metohija, went through a rebirth in the scientific, cultural, and educational sense, primarily thanks to the educational authorities of Serbia, precisely during the period when the Serbian population in the province drastically reduced. Of course, there was also the moving out of Serbian intellectuals under pressure from Kosovo. Only in the course of 1981, scores of doctors left the medical center in Pristina. Scores of professors of university were leaving the faculties in Pristina. On the other hand, the Greater Albanian chauvinist propaganda achieved its peak from 1975 to 1980, following the adoption of the 1974 constitution, giving the province attributes of statehood. Between Yugoslavia and Serbia, actually between Kosovo and Metohija and the neighboring Albania, there was practically no border, and this was during the golden era of the rule of Enver Hoxha in Tirana. To the extent that the Kosovo Albanians during the time of Tito were given ever-growing autonomous rights, their appetites for even greater independence grew as the first step towards secession. The first mass destructive demonstration date from November 1968. It became evident that later, following the period of 1980, they were no longer satisfied with broad autonomy and guaranteed political and human rights as provided for under the Constitution of 1980. And this was expressed in the mass rebellion of Albanian separatists in the spring of 1981 under the slogan of the creation of Kosovo Republika, Kosovo Republic. And this is also something that is mentioned by your witness, Ivan Christo. The influence of foreign factors who supported and aided the breakup of Yugoslavia was quite considerable. Precisely these factors of influence came out with quite a malicious claim, and that is that the crisis in Kosovo and Metohija actually occurred in 1989 with the adoption of the amendments to the Constitution of Serbia, stating that they abolished the autonomy in Kosovo and limited the human rights of Albanians. This is quite without foundations. The Serbian constitutional amendments in 1989 established a constitutional or unity of the Republic of Serbia, which up until then was under the tutelage of its two provinces, because Kosovo and Vojvodina, up until the adoption of those amendments, participated in the rule of that of the Republic, but the Republic did not have any influence over what was going on in the provinces. So the Republic, in parts of its own territory, could not implement its constitutional authority, primarily being to care for the benefit of its own people. By the amendments in the Republic of Serbia in 1990, the anomalies were corrected in the position of the Republic of Serbia in relation to its autonomous provinces. And these amendments of 1989 and the Constitution of 1990 did in no way infringe on or abolish the human rights of Albanians. They still continue to enjoy free education, press, publishing in their own language. And in everything else, proceedings before judicial organs, they could do that in their own language, and they were more protected than any national minority in any other country. With the secession of Slovenia and Croatia, the Kosovo crisis entered into a new phase. From the forming of the terrorist KLA, the Albanian secessionists began with